Oh, yeah. January 6th defendants January 6th convicted folks deserve every ounce of prison time that they get. It's Salty Saturday. We are looking at items in the news. We're not worried about being productive. I do want to stress the number one thing that we should be doing is looking at 2024. All of this crap that we've had to put up with for years and years and years does not get dealt with until we have got a bright blue House, Senate, and White House. It's got to be that. We're just going to keep having to negotiate with people who do not negotiate in good faith otherwise. Let's read some comments. Jesus didn't charge says Green has power to call. Green has power because she raises lots of money for some reason. Yeah, she raises money. This will break your heart. A lot of money that she raises are small dollar donations. They're from some of the 74 million people around the country that believe her when she lies to them, and are willing to believe anyone who says that the problem are minorities. Foxy Dragon says they would just say something even more outrageous to distract from the fact check if fact checked. Yes, that's exactly correct. Let's have a look. I want to get a little bit of ball busting done for the left, but not in a way that is actually harmful at all. I think in a way that's going to be useful. That's going to be good training for the primaries coming up for lefties, which is Left Reckoning examining Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders in 2020. Lefties right now are kind of torn on the subject of Elizabeth Warren. Should she have ended her run for the presidency earlier when it looked like Bernie Sanders was the guy? I mean, he was a progressive and he was winning in the primaries, state after state. He was winning early on. It wasn't until South Carolina that Joe Biden got his second wind, and all of those moderates folded, Buttigieg, etc., etc. It's a fair question to ask, but I'll tell you my thoughts on primaries generally, and I'm interested in your opinions as well. And I'm interested to hear. I haven't seen any of this. I'm interested to hear what the Left Reckoning crew says. But my thoughts are primaries should be conducted in such a way that you play it to the hilt if that's what you feel you want to do. Candidates as well as people voting for the candidates. If you feel there is a person who is genuinely best for the country, if you prefer Warren to Sanders, I don't think there's anything wrong with going as hard as you possibly can the whole way. Is it good strategy? Not necessarily in the short term. There's a case to be made that maybe Bernie would have been president. Maybe. If Warren would have folded. But my counterpoint to that would be if you can't take, not be given, but take all of Warren's voters, that lessens the odds that you would have been able to get them to come out and vote in the general election. Doesn't guarantee that's the case. My point is it's competitive for a reason, and it should be competitive. And most importantly, whether you agree with that or not, after the primary, guns go down. This is the whole puppy fighting thing. After the primary, even if you disagree with how things went, You turn your energy onto fighting people that disagree with everybody that was running in the primary. But let's see what the left reckoning fellas had to say about this. By the way, if you are a lady who's out there and you're like, I kind of have a lot of thoughts about politics, and I have a great internet connection, and I have a so-so camera and a so-so microphone. I don't know. Do I want to be online talking about this? I would plead with you that you do it. Because lately I've noticed there's more on the left, certainly. There's not a ton of ladies having their voice heard out there. I'm going to make an active effort to bring you content from all over. But if you're a lady who's thinking about getting started in this game, your old pal Jake will help you as much as he can. So start a channel and let me know about it, and we'll look at the videos on here. But let's look at what the folks from Left Reckoning have to say about one of the most interesting primary races I have ever seen.
And we got some fun stuff. I mean, should we start with the big man himself, Matt?
With Bernie?
With Bernie.
Yeah, so Department of Home Goods at Joe Mayal on Twitter has a screenshot of the new Bernie Sanders book that he's going everywhere promoting, and I found it interesting. Here is a screenshot. Something really loud going on outside. I hope that's not too audible. Bernie writes this. It continues from the past section about candidates that were still seen in many circles as credible. Two of the leading moderate Democrats in the race, Pete Buttigieg and Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar, abruptly canceled their candidacies and endorsed Biden. Both flew to Texas, the most hotly contested of the primary states, to appear with the former president. They were joined by another former candidate, Texan Beto O'Rourke, in a highly choreographed show of support. The establishment had succeeded in uniting in support of Biden, the candidates who had been dividing up the moderate vote. Meanwhile, the liberal and progressive vote continued to be divided between Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and myself.
Going to get to the specifics in a moment, but Salty Saturday, we're not being nearly as structured. Let's read some comments. Foxy Jesus Didn't Charge says, it was lovely to have two progressive voices simultaneously. Yes. One hidden benefit to having two progressives debating each other on stage is how much that shifts the Overton window. Because you stop having a conversation about whether or not we should have Medicare for all, for example, and you start having a conversation about how best to implement Medicare for all. And the reason a debate is good versus a mutual back-patting contest is people get fiery. Particularly on the left, people get fiery. People enjoy taking a side and defending their side. And that's good. That's very good. Because I'll tell you, if Bernie or Warren had gotten elected, you would have had a much stronger, first of all, implementation of Medicare for all, and you would have had simply more people who were aware of it. Even if they didn't get elected, which was always the most likely scenario, you suddenly have people who are talking now to Joe Biden about, well, wait a minute, I really got into this Medicare for all talk. I learned a lot when I was looking at which side I agreed with more, and the thing that I agreed with most is that we ought to have it. Joe Biden, what's your pitch for Medicare for all? And so on and so forth. It's very good. It is very good to have lefties debating. Although, I worry about this book. Wait a minute. I have It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. Oh, I've read this passage. Interesting. All right, here we go. It's not exactly trashing Warren, if I recall correctly, nor should it be.
But poor showings in Iowa and New Hampshire.
For the record, I was for Bernie. And I was mildly annoyed that Warren didn't back out, but she has a right to.
Nevada and South Carolina, Warren chose to stay in the race. I was close to her on the issues than any other candidate. But at a point where her endorsement could have been significant in a number of Super Tuesday states, she chose not to give it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, no revelations there in the
Yeah.
sense of, like, we all know, but glad to hear Bernie, like, speaking true about what happened there. Because, I mean, nothing short of, like, I mean, that is, like, the betrayal. You know,
Yeah.
like, so many people on the left, you know, they talk about, oh, we're worried about this person who's sort of close to us, or like, oh, this person might not have their heart in the game or whatever. Very fair. I mean, we make those points too, but this is probably one of the most consequential ones, and therefore, like, makes it one of the worst, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know about that. Honestly, let me know what you think in the comments. But betrayal seems a little harsh. How many voters really did Elizabeth Warren take with her when she kept on keeping on? How narrow were these losses that Bernie lost by after Buttigieg et al. Gave up the ghost? I mean, maybe they'll make a case that it really did come down to Warren or not. And I understand why Sanders would be like, God damn it, Elizabeth, what the hell? I had this thing. But it always feels like when you're in the pilot seat, it always feels like you're the fastest plane, you know? Because you have that perspective of it. I don't think Elizabeth Warren, look, a lot of folks who have been on the left for a while know what the real numbers are. And what we lose out to most often, in fact, I think we saw this happen in this very primary race that they're talking about. What we lose out to isn't other lefties. It's not. It's people who are afraid of losing the race. It's the reason I, God help me, voted Clinton in 2016 in the primary. Because I was convinced, as so many other people get convinced, that the way to win is to go centrist. It's not, for the record. It turns out the centrists are the hated, despised group, and that you have a much better chance of winning by doing honest politics and appealing to your base and making a strong case in your arguments to your base, and so strong, in fact, that it appeals to people on the other side of the aisle who are just as fed up with their centrists. That we have seen time and time again is what actually converts people, if converting people is your plan. But if you live in a blue state, for example, people think, well, that means you've got to be, if you live in a purple state, for example, people think, well, that means you've got to be more to the center because people in this state have centrist views. It's purple. We could go either way. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is there are just as many lefties as there are righties. The goal is to get more people out voting for you. And you're just not going to motivate people in your base if you're like, I am going to get out there and really, really water down everything I do. It'll be indistinguishable from the other side. Come out and vote for me. I won't get done. That's the problem. And I just don't think Elizabeth Warren took so many voters with her that it affected the campaign. Contrast that. I mean, if Sanders was going to win, at the end of the day, it had to be because he convinced people that would have voted for Buttigieg, for example, to vote for him instead of Biden when Buttigieg turned in. Kamala Harris, people that would have voted for her instead of Biden. They would have had to choose to vote for him. The fact that they didn't, that tells me that the Bernie didn't do a good enough job. He did a great job, but still not good enough to overcome that decades-long misconception of how American politics works. And I don't think there's any fault to be assigned there. Would it have been a better strategic plan to get a lefty in office for Warren to look at the numbers, admit that even if a lefty won the primary, it wasn't going to be her. It was going to be Sanders. Yeah, it probably would have been. But was it a betrayal? No, come on. I don't think so. And in Bernie's book, I'm pretty sure he doesn't even say it like that. What does he actually say? Well, let me get that. But at a point where her endorsement could have been significant in a number of Super Tuesday states, she chose not to give it. Yeah. Even as the centrists vote coalesced around Biden, okay. Yeah, so when he goes on in that passage, he says, our campaign still won California and yada, 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 yada. He doesn't go on to say it was Warren's fault. But we'll go on here in these fellas. Ooh, Patrick Thibodeau. Corporate Republicans and Democrats will always tell us why we can't do something. Bernie always wants to tell us why we can do something. Yes, agreed. And by the way, I think the next person who is not literally so old that we're concerned about their survival in office, I'm not trying to dunk on older politicians. I hate that. But it is a conversation when they're in their 80s, for example. Because Bernie had a heart attack in that campaign. But the next politician who is genuinely on the left, is coherent, who is charismatic, they're going to, I think, just get every single vote. I mean, I think people on the left and formerly on the right are going to vote for them because a lot of folks have woken up. Foxy Dragon says, if you are going to run, why give up? Shouldn't it be let the best person win? That is exactly what I think. Yes. I think the competition is necessary. I think it's good. I think it's healthy. I think it's necessary because the alternative is we pull our punches so much in the primaries that we have a candidate who is utterly unprepared for the non-punch pulling general election. And you need someone who's already endured to endure that. Patrick Thibodeau says, Warren was hedging her bets because she will play ball. I like her, but with Bernie, what you see is what you get. Agreed. Patrick Thibodeau says, are you bleeping yourself in real time, Jake? That's impressive. Yes, I have done it since I was a kid as a gag to mess with my buddies, and it ends up being incredibly useful in a YouTube career. Weird little thing that worked out well. Let's hear what the rest of these motherfuckers have to say.
I mean, that is like the betrayal. You know, like so many people on the left.
I just wanted to call them motherfuckers. I actually and do the bleep thing. This is one of my favorite shows, for the record, on YouTube, and I highly recommend giving it a listen whenever it's on. Left Reckoning is excellent.
You know, they talk about, oh, we're worried about this person who's sort of close to us, or like, oh, this person might not have their heart in the game or whatever. Very fair. I mean, we make those points too, but this is probably one of the most consequential ones, and therefore like makes it one of the worst, if that makes sense, right? Like this made a difference.
And it's caused a lack of
let's get those snakes going in the chat.
Like it should have been obvious as a matter of logic what the move was for Elizabeth Warren. Even from a self-interested perspective of, say, I want to support that wing, she could have endorsed Bernie, and then like she would have had some credibility for like Biden administration to say like, hey, we'll bring you in. She torched all of that to burn Bernie out with the rest of the crew, and like that is, I don't know what else you need to say about, and I guess like that's why it's nice just to have Bernie say it, because just detailing in chronological order what happened is damning for that political project.
I mean, I think it is damning, and it's also like what project, because it's funny. Like certain people talk about how like Bernie is like just sheepdogging people in the Democratic Party or whatever. I mean, you want to talk about a movement that's just like not even distinct from the Democratic Party, like Warrenism.
Right.
Like yeah, like it's great. They want to like return to like some level of bank regulation, not particularly radical. Even within that party, and the bigger question there, it's always going to be the question in politics, is the question with Bernie, it's the question with Marianne Williamson, anybody. It's like, can you mobilize and motivate a section of working people to do the legwork to make sure that you're
Right.
able to do those things? But Warren never got that. Warren had a lot of affection and attention from the media class, though. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And in fact, like I think sometimes was sort of overrepresented in that race, because so many of the liberal arts college, so I'm sounding like such a conservative, whatever, but it's what I think. It's like, like there's a section it's a cultural class, right? It's a section
Yeah.
of people, they go to a certain kind of school, they're left liberals, but they don't really like working class politics because those people have bad views, and they're not cultivated or appropriate or whatever. I mean, a lot of the Warren campaign was about browbeating the Sanders campaign for how rude Bernie was. I mean, you remember Warren.
So I remember that. Warren, I feel like she did some attacks on Bernie that were beneath her and beneath her voters, and they worked really well. I remember I had some Warren voters in my life who suddenly hated Bernie Sanders and literally called him a sexist. I was like, Bernie Sanders, really? You think? All right. I was annoyed that she chose to go that route, but again, if you can be injured, what is that movie, 30 Days of Night? Remember the vampires in that movie? I'm a big damn nerd. You're going to have to excuse me. But there was this thing that they said that like stuck with me. Like to this day, I barely remember the plot of that movie. I'm lying. I remember it in great detail now that I think about it. But anyway, the thing that I always recall when I think about that movie is this phrase: If it can be broken, it must be broken. That is a primary. And if Bernie couldn't handle an attack from a Warren voter saying, you're a sexist, with no real evidence to show that, how the hell was he going to handle the wild stuff Donald Trump would have said? I don't think those attacks actually hurt him. I think it hurt Warren more than it hurt anybody, because it was embarrassing to see her result to that. It was like, oh, okay, so you're going to lose if you talk about serious things with Bernie Sanders. Okay. And the people that already support you there, I think they see that too, and they are looking for anything that they can do to weaken or to believe in that would weaken the person they see as their primary competition for other people's votes. If it can be broken, though, in a primary, it must be. You gotta. This is a testing ground for attacks. So get brutal. Hell yeah. I would say where that crossed the line for me slightly was that it created an untrue narrative that somebody would have been able to latch onto in the general election. I certainly don't think you should be allowed or permitted to by your voters to lie. I think if you say something, you better have the evidence to back it up, and it just wasn't so with Bernie and Warren. But again, they're talking about the tactics she used, and while I also don't agree with them, it's still, I see the primary as an almost sacred battleground. I think it is very healthy and very necessary to not restrict how competitive someone is allowed to be when they are competing for your vote.
Through some really horrible pot shots at Bernie.
No, that's the problem. Is like this is all in the broader context of Bernie ran for president 2 times, And ahead of the Iowa primaries, both times he was smeared as sexist in absolute bullshit fashion, in a way that devalues the currency of any sort of claims like that, in a way that people who care about sexism should give a fuck about. And Elizabeth Warren was right there to be party to that and say, oh yeah, Bernie said this thing. I'm not going to say what he said.
No. Do you remember what she said about what Bernie said?
What her staffers said was that Bernie told her that a woman could never be president.
Yeah.
Now, I think that is like she could have easily said like, no, he didn't say that. And instead she just played the victim, frankly.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, so like, well, isn't it tough what we have to go through? Not part of any kind of movement. And I'll be honest, like, I don't think that Bernie said that in any way other than saying like, this is just a generic, like, look at the ballot and there's a lot of energy behind Trump. Like,
yeah, agreed. I think he does go on to talk about that in his book. With the book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. Obviously, I was more concerned with the capitalism that he talks about. But he does talk about that a little bit, and he does, from his perspective, in his words, say, yeah, what I had said to Warren, I don't even think in his book, he says that wasn't saying she couldn't win. He was saying that was one of the things that was going to make it difficult for her to win, as was the fact that he was a Jewish man. But as they point out themselves, this isn't a new thing to have Bernie Sanders attacked with, and it would have, if it really would have hurt him all that bad, then he wouldn't have won the general. It really comes down to everybody else coalescing behind Biden. And even if that, was the cause of it, which I personally believe was the cause, when Buttigieg and Harris and just the whole gang said, okay, we're not winning, but we don't want the progressives to win, so we're gonna back Biden, and hopefully one of us will be VP, and one of us will be Secretary of Transportation, and one of us will, yeah. That's what did it, in my opinion. But even if that was the case, it doesn't really matter, is the point. At the end of the day, it comes down to which individual made the best case for themselves to the voters. It comes down to what the voters think of all the candidates. I do think Bernie changed the game in 2016, and I think he changed it again in 2020, because a lot of people just have forgotten what a wild primary that was. But Bernie Sanders was winning the mother early on. He set a new record with the states that he won early. I think this is the first time that somebody has won, I forget which states, but like the first three, but not won the overall election, or rather, not won the primary. America has a taste for progressive politics now, and that is in large part due to Bernie Sanders. In lesser but not insignificant part, by the way, that's also due to Elizabeth Warren. Her questioning of Wells Fargo people, oh my God, it was a thing of beauty. I do believe the next candidate for president of the United States for the Democrats is going to be a true progressive after Joe Biden. Because I think Joe Biden's going to, I think he is going to run in 24. I think he's going to win in 24. And I think following Biden, particularly, and it's Salty Saturday, I don't have proof, we're just having fun here, but my thoughts are that if we get House, Senate, and the White House, and it's all blue, and Biden does the kind of things I would expect a president who is now showing what his legacy will be, the kind of far left, far left politics, America's just going to get a taste for good governance. And I think they will be happily lining up behind the farthest left politician they can in 28. Can you imagine how cool that would be? My God, even if we get 2024 up there, if we can get that all blue, I don't think 2026 is going to result in that counter, what do you call it? That whiplash that always happens. I don't see the Republican Party recovering because they've shown their ass so much with their behavior of late.
Biden won because he's a boring fucking white guy. People know that
Yeah.
sort of shit. And like
There you
the
are.
idea that you would throw your closest political ally under the bus for talking about considerations like that's why you get the snake emojis.
Yeah, no, I mean, in perpetuity, you know what I mean? Like, there's been times and the thing that's always so funny about these conversations, I think, is that like, look, there are going like bump steer of the year last year, right? Jayapal, right? There are going to be votes that she's going to make that I'm going to be like, great, I'm glad that she voted that way, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think it's okay to be able to recognize these people are not our friends and they will stab us in the back. I mean, look, all those people who, I mean, I don't know if we talked about this together, Matt, or if I just did on the Griscom
Yes.
stream, but do you remember the vote to condemn socialism that they did recently?
I was in Mexico for that, but yeah. I do
Okay, yeah,
remember
you're having
that,
a good
yeah.
time and not wasting your time with this.
Whenever somebody asks you what woke means, just remember what that man said. It is the understanding that these people are not our friends, and they only do what we make them do. And by the way, I'm working on a pitch right now for MAGA voters that is built around that. Because something occurred to me recently. I'd like your thoughts on this. Why are we waiting in 2-year chunks for things to change? I acknowledge that 24 is going to be the most consequential year for progress possible. It may not end up being that, but it is where we have the biggest opportunity. But if we want it, you know how I always tell you, write your politician and tell them you want this done or that done. If we could get a significant group of MAGA people who, by the way, agree with us on a lot of actual policies to tell their politicians who don't give a about any sort of principle to do something that we want done, there are opportunities there, folks. There are genuine opportunities. I'm not suggesting that we're going to be friends. We would be in an alliance where it's fully acknowledged and in the open that we hate each other, like genuinely wish ill for the other folks in the alliance. There are folks that I would be willing to work with who I would simultaneously be campaigning to have put in prison. Matt Gaetz, for example. I literally am trying to get sued by that child sex trafficker because he trafficked children for the purposes of making them engage in prostitution. I'm trying to get sued by him because discovery in that would reveal the fact that he is a child sex trafficker and would then result, hopefully, in outcry and get charges. But I'm willing to work with him to get big money out of politics because he said that's what he's for. Because he is such a child sex trafficker, Matt Gaetz, that he doesn't get donations from big money. So he can afford to be against it. Well, we could work with that. Say, okay, you and a bunch of progressives and all your scumbag friends, Matt Gaetz, you child sex trafficker, because you engaged in child sex trafficking. Sue me. What would happen as a result of that is we could all vote against the centrists who rely on big money, who are big political or political bigwigs, because people like back in the day now, Nancy Pelosi used to rake in millions from the NRA, from the tobacco companies, from the oil companies, from whatever the hell you call Elon Musk. They used to rake in money like that. We could literally make our politicians, make our representatives do votes that nobody sees coming, simply because they haven't prepared for an active political populace in the United States. There's sincerely opportunity there. That was a poor time to misclick.
And look, I think that like you could definitely overstate it, right? And like think it's like, oh, this is the biggest deal in the world. But like my point there was just that like all those people who signed on to that letter, they're stabbing us in the back now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think they're going to do when it matters?
In the front, yeah.
Right? Yeah, they're stabbing you in the front. Yeah, exactly. Right? Like, what do you think they're going to do when it matters? And like Warren is another person like that, where it's like, Bernie and Warren certainly are going to get together on like breaking up some big corporations or like trying to get a Bezos or like a Schultz to come and testify before Congress. That's great. Like, that's wonderful. But we know with these people, when it matters, when these systems are sort of under threat from a working class candidacy like Bernie Sanders' candidacy, they will fall in line and play the same game as the Buttigieg and the Klobuchars and all these folks, right? It's understanding who they are and what their role is in this kind of system. And like Warren has, like, I think really had showed herself in that moment, to be like the worst of what people would call like a reformist under capitalism. Or she's a capitalist, right? She doesn't claim to be anything other than that, but you see where those politics end, and they don't end in power.
Some compliments for the Left Reckoning gang. Always, I find their takes to be informative and useful, even if I don't agree with them. There wasn't. That was just an assessment of sort of what happened. Nothing to agree or disagree with there. It's just looking at the train wreck and being like, yeah, that car's messed up. So's that one. Is that one salvageable? Maybe. Also, that what do you call it? Rockabilly that they have, that music. Ooh, that's good music. Your old pal Jake's a big fan of a good tune, and they got good tunes. Yeah. I think Warren's probably done. I think she gained too much hate from that last, done as a serious presidential candidate. Which I think is a shame. I think she tried to be ruthless, but she doesn't understand how to be ruthless. It's just not in her, and that's a compliment. It's a compliment to Warren. She doesn't have that in her. And I think she made the calculation that it was necessary to be ruthless, and so she tried to do some ruthless stuff. And the only result was that it hurt somebody who could have been the president. But in my assessment, which for my assessment and $2 you can buy a cup of coffee. But for my assessment, it didn't hurt him enough to genuinely affect the campaign. What really ended Bernie Sanders' presidential run in 2020 was the fact that everybody else aligned behind Biden and endorsed him. And I think those endorsements would have only directed votes by people who weren't paying close enough attention anyway to consider seriously voting for Bernie. Because Bernie didn't get votes from people that didn't listen to politics and only saw 5 or 10 minutes of this or that. Bernie got the votes of basically everybody who followed it closely and basically nobody who didn't. And all those people were the people that were voting for Pothole Pete or the former dangerous prosecutor, Kamala Harris. C'est la vie. Here's looking towards 2028. And God help me, I'm going to be supporting Dark Brandon, as it's easier to say than Joe Biden in 24. Catherine Wolf says, love Matt. Yeah, he's fantastic. Wireless Mike laughing at the sue me. Let's hope If Matt Gaetz is dumb enough to sue one of the people that calls him a child sex trafficker for the fact that he's, trafficked children for the purposes of sexual intercourse with them, let's hope he's dumb enough to do that. Wireless Mike says, I'm not even anti-capitalist. I'm anti-no regulation. Yes, thank you. Capitalism can't sustain itself without a strong balance of regulation. Foxy Dragon, you and I both agree with Wireless Mike on this one. 100%. That's it exactly. I am. If I'm going to be frank with you, I'm striving for a day when capitalism is like a fun, what do you call it? Like a fun little side thing in our country that you can participate in but don't have to. But that's not going to happen in even my children's lifetime. Should I make enough mistakes to have children? It's just not going to happen. But regulation on capitalism is not only possible, like real regulations on capitalism is not only possible, but it's healthy for capitalism. It is what stops the CEO, as in an analogy I've used before, the CEO of a wooden furniture making company from chopping down the whole forest because they're retiring in a few years, so that there can be a forest to make furniture out of after they have retired. That's what regulation does, and that's what we need. A fun fact, the Nintendo company, the video game maker, they started as a playing card maker in the 1800s. The 1800s, Nintendo came about. That's how long a lot of companies have lasted. And they are able to last that long because they exist within systems that allow for the health of a business seen from a perspective outside of any one individual's lifetime. And the results of that are nothing but good. Mars Falcon says, get us access to those Venmo payments, Matt. Make Gates sue you. Keep pushing him like a child on the swings, mate. Yeah, absolutely. I would love so dearly. First of all, for Matt Gaetz, if he won the lawsuit, the hypothetical lawsuit against me, I would love for him to try to collect. It'd be like, oh, buddy, I've been in the news industry for a decade. I've got a wrinkled $5 bill. Sure, you can have that. That's worth it to me, giving up that wrinkly $5 bill. For your diddling of kids to be displayed for the country to see. Ooh, can't wait. Here's hoping. Well, CNN recently discussed what an ex-FBI official thought of Trump's threats. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. And I want to dry watch. I want to do a fresh watch with y'all here because I'm curious myself to hear what law enforcement assesses Trump's threats to be. And on CNN, where they are trying to appeal to former Trump voters, I'm curious to hear how they're going to spin it. Let's find out. Well, that's not it. Try that again.
The former president. He is once again raising the specter of violence and inciting his followers, and he didn't even lose an election this time. No, this time, he was up at 1 a.m. last night attacking a local prosecutor, calling him a degenerate and figuratively unleashing the dogs of war on the entire country. What does that suggest about how he sees his situation and the larger legal storm he's facing? Some clues.
I mean, I'm not gonna trash them too much, but I have noticed their language has gotten a lot more foxy as they as they go on, including saying and figuratively releasing the dogs of war. They're not far from saying and releasing the dogs of war figuratively on. We'll see. They're not wrong, though, here.
Was to be found in what he posted at 1 this morning on his social network about Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg and potential charges in the Stormy Daniels hush money investigation. He asks how it can happen when, quote, it is known by all that no crime has been committed, and also known the potential death and destruction in such a false charge could be catastrophic for our country. Why and who would do such a thing? His conclusion, only a degenerate psychopath that truly hates the USA. Now, this comes a day after he called Bragg an animal and posted this photo of himself getting ready to swing a baseball bat next to a photo of Bragg. And just today, Bragg's office received a package containing white powder and a threatening note. Now, the powder, thankfully, proved to be harmless, certainly less toxic than some on both sides of the aisle.
Just want to say, and we're going to go back to the both sides of the aisle thing in a second. I can't wait to hear that. The fact that that powder was harmless doesn't mean it's not a instance of terrorism. If you fire blanks at an official, and if you shout, "I'm going to kill you," boom, 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 fire blanks at an official and then speed off, you better stop investigating, bang, 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 run away. Still terrorism. You're threatening someone with violence. That powder that showed up, the message there is this could have been something else. Trying to change what is happening in politics or what the Justice Department is doing, what the government is doing by using violence, that is terrorism. And we have to deal with this. And we have to absolutely get the terrorist in chief tossed in prison.
The rhetoric is.
The twice impeached former president's rhetoric is reckless, reprehensible, and irresponsible.
Let's go back just a bit. Hold up. What did he say?
Say the rhetoric is.
No, come on.
Thankfully, proved to be harmless, certainly less toxic than some on both sides of the aisle say the rhetoric is.
Okay, so so we've been talking for a little bit that CNN is making a strong play for Fox's audience. How interesting to hear him say that the rhetoric on both sides of the aisle is toxic. You'll notice I've been including less CNN clips of late. That's why. Really don't want them to become the new Fox. But a lot of what they are saying, I'm not trying to get people to watch less CNN. It's a personal choice, whatever. A lot of times now, the things they put out require so much correction that it's simply easier to use a different news organization. Yikes. And it also should be telling that in order to appeal to that audience, they have to be dishonest about what's happening.
The twice impeached former president's rhetoric is reckless, reprehensible, and irresponsible. It's dangerous, and if he keeps it up, he's going to get someone killed.
Now, that's House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. His Republican counterpart, Steve Scalise, said there is no place in America for political violence of any kind. But he also echoed the former president, accusing Bragg of carrying out, in his words, a political vendetta. And Jim Jordan, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee, dodged the question entirely.
Just a quick reminder about who Jim Jordan is. I haven't done this in a while. Whenever I talk about Gates, it reminds me that I should be honest about who all these people are. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, let's go back to the very first segment we did. By the way, if you're watching the VOD later, people watching the live got a whole segment because your old pal Jake didn't hit record for that first part. So watch the live stream if you want to see what I'm talking about with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie Taylor Greene harassed David Hogg, the survivor of a school shooting. She told him that she was armed. Well, she ran up to him on the street and shoved a camera in his face. She said she was armed and demanded to know who was funding him. She told this child who had survived a school shooting that she had a gun on her and that she didn't like what he was saying. And she used that to get famous. She also believed at one point that the Jews controlled a satellite that had the ability to start forest fires with a laser. That's Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's who you're giving your money to, by the way, if you are a donor of hers. That's what you're giving your money to. This punk up there had a bunch of students when he was a wrestling coach, had students come up to him and say they were getting sexually abused by a member of the staff at the school he was working at. And what he did was beg them not to say anything. Literally, his students were being sexually abused, and he begged them to cover it up. That's who Jim Jordan is. That's who you got on the right in America in 2023.
When shown the post by a correspondent for NBC, Chairman Jordan told him, in the correspondent's words, he can't read.
By the way, this is hilarious. I'm going to go ahead and let him soak in that. But anytime these people are mentioned in the news, that should be brought up as well until it's dealt with. Until it is dealt with, that should be brought up because it is relevant, because it speaks to the character of these people. We can't allow the media and the general public to ignore those facts.
Jordan, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee, dodged the question entirely. When shown the post by a correspondent for NBC, Chairman Jordan told him, in the correspondent's words, he can't read well without his glasses. Well, the former president apparently can, though, especially, it seems, the tea leaves, because the Manhattan case is only one of many, and they all seem to be coming to a head, especially this week, the federal documents investigation, with his defense attorney, Evan Corcoran, back before a federal grand jury today without attorney-client privilege to shield him from potentially damaging questions. There's that, and now a ruling that all of these former close aides cannot use executive privilege to avoid testimony before the January 6th grand jury. Put it all together, and there's plenty to keep anyone up at night. And tomorrow, the former president has a campaign rally in Waco, Texas. As we approach the 30th anniversary of this, the FBI raid on the Branch Davidian compound, a time and place and incident that has become a touchstone for violent anti-government groups and individuals. And though the Trump campaign says it is a coincidence.
Was anybody else watching the news during that time, during Waco? Very different time in America. What I remember from that, and help me out with my memory here if that's wrong, what I remember is that politics really didn't come into the conversation a whole lot. And it really should have. Because a whole lot of what was responsible for Waco was, in fact, in my opinion, the failure of law enforcement to take these people seriously leading up to Waco. Let me know in the comments if you recall that coverage, and if you recall if there was any serious talk about the legislation we had, about the treatment of the people who stockpiled weapons leading up to that. I don't remember anything being discussed regarding the conditions that led up to it. Only what I remember was we're talking 20 years ago, 30 years ago. But what I recall is only discussion of the handling of the standoff when it happened, not what led to the standoff.
The Houston Chronicle today called the choice of location not just a dog whistle, but a, quote, blaring air horn of a Mac 18 Wheeler, end quote, to extremists. Joining us now, someone who saw a Trump-incited mob up close on January 6th, former Republican congressman and senior political commentator for CNN, Adam Kinzinger. Also CNN senior law enforcement analyst and former deputy FBI director Andrew McCabe, and CNN chief correspondent Caitlin Collins. Caitlin, let me start with you. How are the former president's death and destruction comments being viewed inside the Trump camp? Because Just days ago, his allies and advisors were privately urging him to tone down the rhetoric.
Yeah, they obviously didn't even want him to call for protest, really, in this situation. You saw people like Speaker Kevin McCarthy later saying that Trump wasn't calling for protest, even though he very explicitly did so on his own website, Truth Social. And so this is definitely an escalation, saying that there could potentially be death or destruction if he is indicted, as we know is pretty widely expected at this point, even though it's the timing of that that's unclear. And so this is certainly a cause for concern. I mean, it's been over a week now that I've been hearing from his allies who were saying they did not want to see anything that anywhere close resembled a January 6th playing out on the streets of Manhattan, because it was a major concern of theirs, given how damaging it's been for the former president. And so this just shows, though, I think that also his post, almost a week ago now, when he said he was going to be arrested on Tuesday, which obviously was not borne out, and there was no.
Here's something I haven't heard talked about much. All NYPD were asked to be out in uniform on Tuesday. You remember that? But they didn't arrest Trump Tuesday. So why were they all asked to be out in uniform? Well, that order followed Donald Trump saying that he would be arrested on Tuesday. They were bracing, it would appear, for a riot. It didn't materialize. Fine. But how much do you want to bet that police officials are going to be testifying in Donald Trump's trial about that fact, about why the police were all asked to be in uniform? I have a feeling we're going to hear about that again in a court of law, and they are going to say precisely what we think here. Well, I think here, anyway, which was that it was viewed as a credible threat and an attempt to do another January 6th. At the very least, that a reasonable person would assume that that was a dangerous thing to say. And so if Trump said it, he must have known, or should have known at the very least, what might happen. I also think the fact that that order went out and the fact that it was known to the public that there would be 40,000 cops ready to respond is a big part of the reason why you did not have these, let's be honest, not all that brave folks ready to charge in and gang up. Also helps, by the way, when the person calling for the violence doesn't have the ability to tell the police to just relax. We don't need that much Capitol security on this day that I want to take over the Capitol.
Indication that was actually ever anything that was conveyed to his campaign or to his world. That just shows that he is allowing it to build. He is calling for protest. He's even kind of mocking Republicans who are saying that protests should be peaceful. He's saying they're trying to destroy our country, and people are calling for these, peaceful protests in the wake of that.
So, Andrew, how much does this inflammatory rhetoric?
Yeah, hold up a second, Andrew. I'm going to read some comments. Wireless Mike says, I don't remember either, but I wasn't paying as much attention back then. I was more of a conservative back then, sad to say. Yeah, politics has changed a hell of a lot. And by the way, everybody has learned a ton about how this stuff works in recent years. We've had the rock turned over, and we now see all the bugs that were under it. I would be shocked if there was anybody that hasn't had a change of heart recently. Patrick Thibodeau says, to my earlier post about aggressively violent cults, there just aren't many of them through history. Yeah, true. Mars Falcon, the Koresh jokes went hand in hand with the Jim Jones Kool-Aid stuff, like a shorthand for your nutso. Yeah. No crowds is the best/worst thing that could happen to Trump. He'd be so deflated. Yeah. Mars Falcon, Your Honor, my client would like to enter a plea of stupid as Trump defense team wholeheartedly. Patrick Thibodeau says, regarding the Waco stuff, my wife and I had just moved in together when Waco was going down. It was riveting. The new HBO documentary Waco, American Apocalypse sheds some new light on the behavior of the FBI tactical guys. Interesting. I will have a look at that. Mars Falcon, Ruby Ridge, and Waco were key examples used by preppers and militias to recruit. Yes, that's right. I remember better than Pepperidge Farms on this one. Yeah, I do remember that. In Michigan, as you've seen with the Wolverine Watchmen, we have a ton of militias, and my whole life, they have been a freaky group to me. I have never trusted them. I've never liked them. And they have always been a disturbing bunch. And yeah, they use that. Like even when I was a wee school lad, I would hear militias talking about that stuff. And often I remember Waco being like shorthand for, this is why we got to prep. And it annoyed me even then. Because I remember thinking, like, prep for what? Let's say you win a gun battle with the FBI. Like, okay, you kill all the FBI guys that came to arrest you, and everybody in your compound celebrates. What happens next in your mind? What happens next? Do you think that's the end of it? No. If there are any survivors, they call in the next big military force. Or if there are no survivors and you successfully gun down all the federal agents who were there to arrest you, the government doesn't say, well, it looks like we gotta let them go on being psychopaths. No, the National Guard comes in. You beat the National Guard? Okay. Air Force, Marines, Army. I mean, like, you can't escalate no matter how many guns you buy. You can't escalate to the point that the U.S. government can. And it would be effed up if the U.S. government had to use the actual factual military on its own citizens. That would be effed up, sure. But not as effed up as there being a group of people that are just allowed to be lawless because they killed law enforcement. That can't be allowed to stand and wouldn't be allowed to stand. So the logic of it makes no sense to me. And yet, it has nonetheless been a powerful recruiting tool, as you say.
Heighten the tension and security concerns of what may be a possible indictment next week.
Well, it should absolutely have heightened the security concerns of professionals who are involved in protecting not just New York City, but also Washington, D.C., and any place else around this country where extremist supporters of the former president might gather. I mean, look, what we're seeing here is predictable, and it shouldn't surprise anyone. He is a one-note orchestra. Donald Trump appeals to the lowest common denominator, the most baser, violent instincts of his most extreme supporters. He did it on January 6th. He summoned that mob to D.C. to try to, obstruct the peaceful transfer of power, and he's doing it now to try to get himself out of trouble. And to be clear, he is in a lot of trouble. We all watched this morning while his attorney in the documents investigation entered the grand jury to testify against him. I mean, that is an unprecedented thing that we're seeing. And Evan Corcoran is in a position to provide unbelievably damaging testimony against him. Presumably that happened today. And now 8 of his closest advisors have been told they cannot rely on executive privilege and they must appear as well. So it's a very, very bad week for Trump.
Dan Scavino, my God. There's some of the folks here, like, I cannot wait to read the transcripts of their testimony if and when it becomes available to the public, which seems likely for all of it. Stephen Miller, oh my God. I look forward to the potential of this little channel becoming profitable enough that I can treat it just like any other business and expand it and do other things and hire people and blah, 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 blah. It's a fantasy right now, but you got to strive for something. One of the things in the good version of events where America gets its act together and so on and so forth. One of the things I look forward to doing an extended podcast on is just reading through these transcripts and talking about how insane the last 7 years were, because they were crazy. They are so crazy that there is stuff that has, I promise you, happened that would still make our jaws drop. For example, we always suspected Iran-Contra chicanery. We always suspected the Chenault affair. Well, we've recently had definitive proof of those things come to light. Can you imagine what's going to happen with the Trump administration? Boy, I can't wait for it.
And predictably, he goes low and is resorting to the one thing that he does better than anyone, and that's appealing to people's violent tendencies.
You know, Congressman Kinzinger, knowing everything you know about the lead up to January 6th, you were on the January 6th committee. How concerning are these comments to you? And what does it say that Chairman Jim Jordan and Speaker McCarthy aren't even addressing it?
So I'm concerned, not necessarily about what happens in the next week or 2 weeks. It's all this stuff radicalizes people over time. And people may continue to grow more thinking about violence and eventually going to violence. And it takes a spark that so far we still think, Trump, he'd never say like, hey, come and use violence on my behalf. But he easily could. And he's putting in people's minds to use violence. I got to tell you, John, the thing that bothers me the most, we could talk about this it's the silence of my colleagues, my former colleagues. Every Republican who holds elected office has got to speak up. I don't even care if you don't have to do it on national TV. Put out a statement that says there is the whole purpose, by the way, of politics is to prevent violence. That's why politics was created.
Lord knows that, like, if you were to take Adam Schiff's career and put it all up, 99% of it would be him doing things that I think are despicable. Hell, there's 9 seconds left. Let's let the man finish.
The utter silence is so weak by my party that to me, that's what I can't believe, even more than what Donald Trump puts out on Truth Social.
Yeah, if you were to put Adam Schiff's career on like a line, I would vehemently disagree with 99% of it. But he has got a great point. That's why it's so effed up when a politician calls for violence, encourages these things. Can't do that. That's what we're trying to avoid here. MAGA, I got bad news for you. As many guns as you have, you're just too outnumbered. If it comes down to violence, the left wins basically instantly, because there are literally millions more of us, and you can only use one gun at a time. You don't want that. I tell you this with all honesty. You don't want that. And the great news for you is the people on the left have zero patience for it either. We are trying to be civilized. We are trying to build a country that you, believe it or not, MAGA, you will be happy with as well. We're not trying to build a country that excludes you. We are trying to be inclusive. That's part of what being a lefty is all about. Part of, as I said earlier, being woke, as I hear mentioned so much by right-wingers these days incorrectly, part of being woke, in fact, the main part of being woke, is the acknowledgement that our leaders don't have our best interests in mind unless we insist upon it. There's the rub. Consider it. Yeah, overall, I think Trump's trying to rile people up. I think that's pretty obvious. And I think that all of those folks that Schiff was, not Schiff, that Kinzinger, good Lord, that Kinzinger was talking about just then, that aren't speaking up, that might speak up. I think all of those folks that would speak up are going to be Democrats in 2-3 years. I think once the 2024 ass whipping happens, you can expect a mass exodus from the GOP, the Republican Party. I think probably what's going to happen is anybody who misses being able to screw over Americans quietly instead of loud and obnoxiously, they're going to join the Democrats because they will see that as just the centrist Dems simply as being a group that they can join that will allow them to go over screwing over Americans again with just a few more concessions towards decency, because that is what the centrist Democrats are. They vote primarily in the interest of corporations. The idea behind neoliberalism is that supporting corporations through absolutely letting them decide everything is somehow good. That's the reasoning. It really is that simple, by the way. That's the reasoning. And I think, yeah, it's not going to be hard for them to switch gears like that. I think those spaces in the races will be filled by MAGA adherents. And I think shortly after that, the Republican Party will be seen as a faded, now irrelevant party where only the craziest of the crazies still exist. And then there will be a serious discussion to be had about the genuine uniparty, which will have people who are interested in true progressive politics and people like Nancy Pelosi was, people like Chuck Schumer are, people like Joe Biden generally is. Although I do believe Joe Biden is going to be much easier to sway, particularly in the part 2 of his presidency. But it's going to be divided between them and your Bernie Sanderses and et cetera, et cetera. And there I hope for this. It may not come for a while, but there may even be a time where it just makes more sense to once again divide into two parties. Call them, for the sake of this conversation, the Democrats and the progressives. Or perhaps more accurately, is that right? Yeah. Perhaps more accurately, the progressives and the Democrats. There we go. That would be wonderful were that to happen. I actually think that's likely, the way things have gone. One thing that I think people have way underestimated is what an actual indictment for Trump will do. And this is the sort of thing that you can really only talk about on Salty Saturday. I think people right now are all viewing 2024 as Trump and somebody else in the GOP running in the primaries to try to win the hearts of Republican voters. I don't think Trump's going to be in it. I know, sounds wild, right? One thing that is true about authoritarianism is it goes hand in hand with cowardice. When like one of the first videos I ever did was looking at Kohlberg's system of judging morality. Lawrence Kohlberg was a social scientist that put forth this issue, and I'm gonna toss it to you right now. It lets you judge what your morality is. There's a chemist in a town who's made the cure for a rare disease. A man has his spouse sick with that rare disease. The man goes to the chemist and says, "I need the cure." The chemist says, "I am selling the cure for $2,000. The man says, "I have sold everything I have, and I got loans from my friends, and I have managed to raise $1,000, and I will agree to pay you the rest of the money as soon as I can, but my spouse will die tomorrow if I don't get the cure tonight." And the chemist says, "Too bad. The cure costs $2,000. Closes up shop, leaves. The man breaks into the shop, steals the cure, gives it to his spouse. Kohlberg then asks, was the thief right to steal that cure? Now, your answer to that question isn't as important. By the way, you should try to answer it yourself. See how you feel. Your actual answer isn't as important as the reasoning behind your answer for what your morality is. And it's interesting because really young kids tend to answer a certain way for a certain reason. Children of middle age, you know what? I'm tempted to play the video. Let me know in the comments if you actually want to see the video with the breakdown here. There was another YouTube channel that did a video on it. But to sum it up, people a little bit older tend to give a different answer and a different justification. And the older you get, the more refined your answer gets. And it basically goes like this. Little kids tend to say, the man was wrong for stealing the chemist's cure because he will go to jail. As in, the individual who they're being asked to empathize with, put themselves in the shoes of, was incorrect because he will see a punishment for what happened. Put a big fat pin in that. Kids that get a little bit older say the man was wrong because stealing in general is wrong. That thinking is a little bit more universal. It's a little bit more principled. Like young adults will say, the man wasn't wrong because somebody was going to die if he didn't do what he did. And the chemist was wrong because they were charging too much for the cure. And so on and so forth. Now, you can have whatever reasoning you have for that. You could even say, no. I agree that the person was wrong, but that's because if you interfere with maybe if you interfere with this, maybe the chemist then doesn't have enough money to produce more cure for everybody else. And there's, as I said, your actual answer isn't as important as your reasoning behind the answer. And the funny thing about authoritarian supporters, like MAGA supporters tend to be, is that they define their morality based upon personal consequences. As in, they won't believe something is wrong until they see somebody getting punished for it. If you wonder why they can see all these black people in prison and not think there's something wrong with our system, and instead think there's something wrong with black people, when you suddenly see that that is how they are reasoning, it makes a lot more sense. I'm not saying be sympathetic. I'm saying be empathetic. The difference being understanding the mechanics of what they're thinking. Not agreeing with it necessarily, just understanding the mechanics. Well, he's got a whole faction of America that supports him, that has never seen him suffer in any serious way in the criminal justice system. And what is their conclusion? Their conclusion is that the criminal justice system is out to get him and to waste their time and to waste everybody's time because, look, he's never actually been punished, so he must never actually have done anything wrong. I do truly believe that, number one, when an indictment hits, ooh boy, the tone on him is going to change real quick. And further, just because it's more serious. And further, the facts are going to come out. Remember, you cannot lie in a court of law. You can't lie. And all of the things he's been saying were totally made up, fictional. One by one are going to come out, are going to be exposed for the lies that he's been telling. It's 2023, and people always laugh about the fact that we never correctly guess what the next political cycle is going to be like this early. And we're right. And to that very fact, I could be wrong here. But I don't think, and your old pal Jake is willing to put his threadbare reputation on the line already. I don't think Donald Trump is going to be a significant candidate for president in 2024. I think, no, Ron DeSantis ain't the guy. No, he's not. He just doesn't have it. People don't like him. People aren't going to follow him. But I don't think it's going to be Trump. Because it's not just baggage that he has. It's actual crimes he has done. That's not just baggage. Or rather, calling it baggage is too insignificant. Baggage is you had an affair and it's definitely going to come to light. Or you had an affair and everybody's going to know about it. Or baggage is you screwed up in your last job, Pothole Pete, and people can point to that and say you won't do a good job this time around. Criminal charges is something different altogether, man. Even though, yeah, there's going to be some of his adherents that think he can do no wrong and this is all a lie. The lies he tells to make up for the true things that are being said about him in the press, they're not going to be able to stand up to a basic fact check of court documents. And his adherents are going to have a legitimate question to ask, which is, why are you telling me that, but you wouldn't tell a judge that? And no, it won't be everybody that follows him that thinks this, but a lot will. Whether or not you think they're correct in politics, they have 2 eyes and 2 ears for the most part. I would expect Donald Trump to be done so. It's personal belief. Trumpism, though, that's going to stick around. Foxy Dragon says the thief should have gotten a loan or get a GoFundMe page. Yeah. I do love technology. Mars Falcon says even Bruce Wayne got a different perspective on the left on theft after he stole for hunger the first time. Yes, absolutely. I loved that in the Nolan film as well. Wireless Mike says immaturity of thought on the side of the GOP. Absolutely. Foxy Dragon, well, you actually can lie in a court of law, but if you get caught, you might get in trouble. That's true. That's true. We shouldn't expect him to suddenly start being a truthful person. But the fact that cross-examination is a thing and any argument, when I say you can't lie in a court of law, I fully expect his lawyers to correctly advise him. Not, that was sarcasm, by the way, Foxy Dragon says. Yeah, I know. It's fair enough. But what I mean to stress with that, though, just to be a literalist about it, because it is important. What I mean to stress is that his arguments in a court of law, and this is important to capture, are going to be very different than the arguments he says to the media. And his followers, who will be watching this, because they'll be interested in what happens to their guy, they're going to be flabbergasted that his story about why he didn't break the law is different for the court than it is for them. And that, I think, is going to be the main cause of his losing his base. Wireless Mike points out, we all saw how his opinion of the Fifth Amendment changes when he has to testify. Oh, it surely does. It surely does. Oh, delightful. Hey, folks, if you haven't liked the stream, please give it a like right now. It would help your old pal Jake out quite a bit. Tell your friends about it if you think this kind of content would be useful. By the by, consider, even if you're feeling squirrely, subscribing. I'm going to wrap this one up, put up what will be about half of the recording And if you saw this on the VOD, you're wondering, I wonder what the first segment could have been like. That's in the live stream. Have a look. This has been Salty Saturday on WYCD Wicked. That stands for what you can do. We'll see you next time. My name's Jake.